Even the most celebrated heroes sometimes face a profound sense of solitude. And so Hercules, if only for a brief period, turned his thoughts to marriage once more. His gaze was drawn to Deianira, a princess of Calydon, renowned not only for her extraordinary beauty and sharp wit, but also for a certain spirited independence of character. Yet winning her hand proved to be no trivial task. Deianira already had another suitor, the river god Hercules, a shape-shifting deity who reasonably asserted his claim based on his seniority, divine origin, and, notably, a far shorter history of public chaos. But Hercules, whose nature never tolerated defeat in any contest, promptly challenged him to a duel. The two met in a struggle, demonstrating not only strength but also mastery of transformation. Hercules turned into a coiling serpent, but Hercules effortlessly crushed him in his mighty embrace. The river god then assumed the form of a raging bull, yet even here Hercules proved superior, breaking off one of its horns. This very horn was destined to become the legendary cornucopia, a symbol of abundance and generosity. It is truly poetic that one of the most ancient and enduring symbols of harvest and feasting originated as the severed horn of a deity vanquished in a bridal contest. Hercules and Deianira were wed, and for a time, peace reigned in their lives. They settled in Calydon, and the hero seemed to find contentment. However, peace, as often happens, proved fleeting. A dispute soon arose, an inevitable occurrence when mortal politics intertwine with divine lineage. The couple was compelled to leave Calydon, embarking on a journey to find a new home. And it was during this very journey that the shadow of tragedy once again began to pursue them. On the banks of a turbulent, fast-flowing river, they encountered the centaur Nessus. Nessus offered to carry Deianira across the watery expanse, while Hercules swam alongside. Such an offer was not out of the ordinary. Centaurs, though famed for their wild nature, sometimes served in such capacities. However, Nessus harbored far more sinister intentions. Midway across the river, he attempted to abduct Deianira. Hercules, standing on the opposite bank, instantly perceived what was happening. Without the slightest hesitation, he drew his bow and released an arrow. The arrow, as always, was poisoned with the deadly venom of the Hydra. It struck its target precisely. Nessus collapsed, mortally wounded. But with his last breath, he managed to twist his defeat into something far more insidious. Calmly and persuasively, he convinced Deianira that his blood, now mingled with the pain of rejected love, could serve as a potent love potion. If she ever feared Hercules might be unfaithful, a cloak soaked in this blood would bind his heart to hers forever. This was a monstrous lie, of course. The centaur's blood was now contaminated with the same lethal poison that had slain so many monsters before him. But Deianira, alas, believed his words. Years passed. The couple settled in a new place. Hercules once again immersed himself in his heroic wanderings, performing feats, garnering honors, and occasionally, as with the young princess Iole, demonstrating his admiration perhaps too openly. Deianira, upon hearing rumors of his interest in Iole, was seized by panic, not of anger, but of deep sorrow, and the despair that only love and insecurity can engender. She recalled Nessus's treacherous words. Deianira prepared a cloak as he had instructed, soaked it in the blood, and sent it to her husband. Hercules, ever trusting, donned the gift. The very moment the fabric touched his skin, an unbearable torment began. a pain unlike anything he had ever experienced, and that is saying much, considering he once held the sky on his shoulders. The poison acted swiftly, permeating his flesh, burning not like fire but like betrayal. He tried to tear off the garment, but it clung to him. The more he struggled, the more damage it inflicted. His skin adhered to the cursed cloak. His immense strength proved meaningless. In this moment lies something profoundly human. The strongest man in myth was vanquished not by a monster or a blade, but by trust, love, and the unintentional cruelty of one who meant him no harm. Hercules, realizing his end was near, ascended Mount Oeta. He commanded a funeral pyre to be built. No one dared to ignite it, out of reverence or fear. Finally, a wanderer, sometimes identified as Philoctetes, a skilled archer, agreed. Hercules, in gratitude, bequeathed his bow to him, a sacred weapon destined to play a significant role in the future Trojan War. And then he lay down, surrounded by kindling, and awaited the flames. As the fire consumed his mortal body, something astonishing occurred. His divine half, the essence inherited from Zeus, ascended unharmed. He rose to Olympus, shedding pain, memories, and the entire burden of mortality. And there, in what might be called the most unexpected reconciliation in mythology, Hera welcomed him. The goddess who had persecuted him since birth, who had tried to kill him with serpents in his cradle, received him into the heavens and gave him her daughter Hebe, the goddess of youth, as his wife. It was an elegant ending, perhaps even too elegant. But myth is meant to reflect not so much justice as profound meaning. Hercules became a god. He was worshipped in sanctuaries throughout Greece and beyond. Athletes offered prayers to him for strength. Soldiers invoked his name in battle. Ordinary people facing hardships remembered that even Hercules suffered. He was no longer merely a hero. He became a symbol of endurance, redemption, the long and arduous path from error to forgiveness. His image appeared on vases, in temple carvings, in the minds of poets and orators. Romans erected temples to him. Byzantines later reinterpreted his significance. And even today, his story resonates in comic books, in muscular heroes on silver screens, in metaphors about impossible labors and the strength to persevere. For Hercules did not merely battle monsters. He battled himself, his impulses, his rage, his guilt. And in the end he emerged from this struggle, scarred, burned, perhaps even a little wiser, but having found peace. Not all heroes are crowned with olive leaves. Some are crowned with flames. Some find paradise not through purity, but through perseverance. And so the storyteller leaves him not on the pyre, not on Olympus, but somewhere in between, still walking, perhaps, in the twilight lands of memory, still a figure of strength and sorrow, of justice and mistakes. His labors are complete, and the listener is invited to conclude their own journey through the pages of this story. The story of Hercules, one might think, reached its divine conclusion. He was granted immortality, welcomed onto Olympus, and married Hebe, the goddess of eternal youth. It was a fitting end for a life woven from pain, muscle, and fire. Yet, Greek myth was never particularly adept at leaving things as they were. Even the gods, it seems, are restless. And though Hercules ascended, tales of his deeds on earth continued to ripple outwards, like the aftershocks of a long-forgotten earthquake. You see, the Greeks did not neatly confine their heroes within narrative frameworks. They allowed them to stretch, to contradict, to reappear. And so Hercules, though now divine, remained curiously involved in mortal affairs. His cults grew, his adventures expanded, entire cities claimed his presence, and in many places he wasn't merely remembered. He was still active, a hero who, despite his apotheosis, never ceased to move. This chapter, therefore, is not a single, coherent narrative. It is rather a patchwork quilt of lesser-known tales, drifting between myth and cult, between the whispers of legends and formal ritual. Hercules, the wanderer, a god who could never stay in one place. Let's begin with the curious case of Hercules and Prometheus. Prometheus, as you may recall, had a rather unfortunate time after stealing fire for humankind. Zeus, in a mood perhaps best described as perpetually displeased, had him chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains. There an eagle, large, persistent, and presumably quite pleased with its career choice, devoured his liver daily, only for it to regenerate each night. It was divine punishment with a certain grim poetry. And then one day Hercules appeared. No grand motives are given. He was simply passing by, as gods and heroes often do in these tales, and found Prometheus still bound, still bleeding, still waiting. Hercules, ever practical, took his bow and, just like that, shot the eagle. One arrow. Then he broke the chains. Zeus, surprisingly, allowed it. Perhaps touched by the heroic gesture, or perhaps simply weary of the whole affair. It is a striking episode. Hercules, a mortal turned god, freeing a titan who championed humanity. Two rebels briefly meeting at the edge of myth, one lifting the burden of the other. It is the kind of story that doesn't roar. It hums quietly, persistently in the memory. Soon after, Hercules found himself embroiled in another conflict, this time against a certain King Laomedon of Troy. The king, as often happens with rulers in Greek myth, was both proud and dishonest. He promised Hercules a reward, specifically horses, if the hero would rescue his daughter, Hesione, from a sea monster. Hercules, of course, agreed. He slew the monster, saved the maiden, and then was promptly informed that the promised reward would, in fact, not be given. This was a mistake. Hercules later returned with an army, sacked the city, and killed Laomedon. In the chaos, he gave Hesione to the archer of her choice. She chose Telamon, a companion of Hercules. Together they would become the ancestors of Ajax, one of the greatest heroes of the Trojan War. Thus, Hercules inadvertently and indirectly helped set the stage for the Trojan conflict, not through prophecy or divine manipulation, but because he was cheated out of some horses, and quite reasonably decided he had better things to do than accept royal ingratitude. Another, perhaps less dramatic, but certainly no less instructive story unfolds in ancient Lydia. Here the great Hercules found himself in an extraordinary period of his life, marked by servitude. Legend has it that he was sold into the service of Queen Omphale. The reasons for this event are recounted differently in various sources. Some tales claim it was an atonement for murder, an act that was neither the first nor the last in his tumultuous existence. Others suggest it was a form of penance imposed upon him by the gods, so that he might learn humility. However, what is most intriguing is what transpired during this time. Omphale, unlike many Greek queens, did not want the demigod to simply idle about, wreaking havoc. She made him work, and not in Hercules' usual manner. He engaged in spinning, weaving, and all manner of domestic chores. In some versions of the myth, she even donned his famous lion skin and carried his mighty club, while Hercules wore her exquisite garments and jewelry. This could be interpreted as a comical role reversal, and indeed, ancient vase painters gleefully depicted these scenes. But beneath the surface lay something far deeper, a softening. The hero, stripped of his usual tools, his warlike temperament, his public persona, was presented to the world. It was a glimpse of the man beneath the lion skin, or perhaps, more accurately, a hint that true heroism does not always need to manifest in a thunderous roar. Sometimes it lies in simply folding laundry. It also served as a reminder of the Greeks' deep fascination with role reversal, with upending the expected order of things just to observe the consequences. Omphale, a strong and shrewd ruler, held sway over the mightiest hero of myth, and Hercules, still formidable, obeyed her not out of weakness, but out of something that almost resembled curiosity. Then followed the less significant, yet quite persistent, episodes of his life, which, while too minor for epic poems, were too insistent to vanish entirely from memory. In some traditions he aided the Argonauts, though he did not complete their legendary voyage. He was present in Calydon, though the main focus there was on Meleager and the famous boar. He trained warriors, offered wise counsel to kings, and occasionally resolved disputes that no one else in Boeotia could settle. Rumours circulated that he himself founded the Olympic Games, though this high honour was also attributed to Pelops and even Zeus himself. Nevertheless, Hercules' enduring presence at Olympia became firmly rooted in the cultural imagination. His numerous statues adorned gymnasiums. Wrestlers made libations in his name before their matches. He was not merely remembered, he was felt as a living presence, invoked in the sweat and struggle for athletic glory. In the Roman world he underwent a new reinterpretation. Hercules, as he was known in Latin, was no longer the rough, guilt-ridden wanderer. He transformed into a civic hero, a builder of temples, a protector of roads, and a patron of commerce. Merchants offered prayers to him for safe passage. Legionaries marched under his image. Emperors adopted his iconography, seeking to associate themselves with his might. Even Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, admired him, articulating his thoughts on strength and endurance in tones that clearly echoed the Hercules model. However, this was a different Hercules, polished, politicized, smiling in marble. The crude, impulsive man who once burned on a pyre had now become a talisman of virtue. He was still mighty and noble, but, one might say, a little embellished. And yet his image remained captivating through centuries, cultures, and countless reinterpretations. The figure of Hercules persisted not because he was perfect. On the contrary, his enduring relevance lay in his humanity. For all his incredible strength, he failed. For all his divinity, he doubted. He raged in anger, loved with passion, grieved deeply, and tried again. His labours, colossal as they were, mirrored the smaller, everyday toils of ordinary life, tasks that people repeat, endure, and ultimately complete. On the southern coast of Sicily, in Agrigento, stands the Temple of Hercules, or rather, what remains of it. Its columns now lean, silent witnesses to millennia spent under the influence of wind, sea salt, and scorching sun. No one worships there any more, but the stones still hold the warmth of summer light. And somewhere beneath the ruins, a story breathes. It is a quiet story, a tale not of grand feats or monsters, but of a man who once sought peace. And perhaps, in the retelling of that story, people also find a measure of such peace. For the true legacy of Hercules, perhaps, lies not in his strength, not in his glory, and not even in his immortality. Perhaps it is in the fact that he never stopped. He walked through sorrow and fire across continents and centuries, leaving behind an image, a memory, that affirms. Struggle is not defeat, labor is not failure, and even the strongest must kneel to rise again. May the myths continue. May he appear where needed, in sacred temples, in songs, in night dreams. May he remain the wandering god, the roaming hero, the old friend whom people sometimes remember when difficult times arrive. His club may be gone, but his footprints remain forever. The narrator might suggest to their listener to close their eyes and embrace repose. The world, with all its worries, can wait until the next dawn. A new labour will only begin with the morning, and this night is for sleep. Stories, as is well known, have a way of ending, but not all of them fade instantly. Some depart gently, like the light of a candle slowly dimming in the bottom of a glass. Others echo in memory for so long that people forget how to make them stop. And some, rare and special, continue to live long after the last sentence has been uttered. Hercules, or Heracles as he was originally called, is one such story. He began his journey, like many Greek heroes, in contradiction. Part god, part man, born of a forbidden union between Zeus and a mortal woman, he was hated by the queen of the gods before he even learned to speak. Loved by many, but feared by even more, he was called to atone for himself with deeds so arduous that they have remained in the memory of generations forever. The reader has followed him through all his trials, the serpent in the cradle, the labours that pushed the boundaries of the known world, a moment of madness, battles with river gods and monsters, the struggle with grief itself, the poisoned cloak, the cleansing fire, the ascent to Olympus, and finally, his restless peace. Yet, even after 10 chapters and thousands of words, one key question remains. Why does he endure? Why does he maintain his presence not only in temples and textbooks, not only in the pages of epic poems or the flickering frames of Saturday morning cartoons, but in the minds of people? Why does Hercules still live in metaphors, in gyms, in dreams, in quiet internal dialogues? The matter, it is suggested, is not so much his physical strength. Strength abounds in myths. Titans held up the sky, Cyclopes hurled boulders, Achilles was swift, Odysseus cunning, and Theseus brave. But Hercules was different. His uniqueness lay not in what he could do, but in what he had to do, and more importantly, in what he endured while performing these tasks. The Greeks never idealized Hercules. He was impulsive, unpredictable. He killed when he shouldn't have. He wept when others might have held back. He pleaded for help. He made mistakes and paid for them for years. And yet, despite all these flaws, he continued his journey. This, and not the lion skin or the club, is the true form of his legacy: persistence. The ancient Greeks had a specific word for this concept, karteria, meaning endurance. It was the ability to bear suffering with dignity, to withstand the unbearable, to carry one's guilt on one's back, like a heavy sack of stones, and still climb the mountain, to clean stables when the unbearable stench permeates to the bone, to fight the hydra, knowing that new heads only grow back, to undertake tasks that no one asked for, to clean up the mess left by others, and to do it not for glory, but because it had to be done. Hercules became the embodiment of these profound ideas. He was not a hero of victory, but a hero of effort. The Stoics clearly saw this. For them, he represented not just a pile of muscles, but a moral foundation. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, does not directly mention Hercules, but his spirit is felt in the emperor's tone. You must build up your life action by action, he writes, and be content if each one achieves its purpose as far as possible, and no one can prevent you from doing this. This, in essence, was the life Hercules lived, not flawless, not easy, not without mistakes, but consistently persistent. And in this persistence lay something divine, even in death or apotheosis, depending on one's perspective. Hercules did not settle into stillness. He did not become some aloof, distant deity, drifting on clouds and sipping ambrosia in boring omnipotence. He remained active, invoked, constantly present. In Thebes, athletes poured oil on altars in his name. Wrestlers rubbed their hands and whispered prayers to him. Soldiers painted the lion's head on their shields not because they expected invincibility, but because they needed courage. Merchants left offerings before long journeys. Even ordinary people, not kings, not warriors, not philosophers, saw in him one who knew what labor was. In this lay the comfort. To imagine that such a mighty figure still understood hardship, that even gods once had to suffer long days and difficult choices, and that the divine could arise not only from miracles but from repetition, from resilience. He also changed over time, and this too was part of his strength. He became what people wanted him to be. For the Greeks, he was an imperfect mortal striving for perfection. For the Romans, he appeared as the empire's muscular cousin, civilized and confident. For Christians of late antiquity, he became a kind of pagan penitent, one who suffered for past transgressions and was transformed. In the Renaissance, he returned again as the ideal man, strong in body, brave in spirit, sometimes nude in marble, but always upright. In the modern world, he has become the archetype of the hero's journey, trials, growth, triumph, even when the names change. He was Gilgamesh, Beowulf, Frodo, Luke Skywalker. Every character who starts unprepared, suffers, fails, learns, and somehow, wounded but wise, triumphs. His presence could be felt even when it went unnoticed. It is embodied in the firefighter bravely pushing through dense smoke. It lives in the parent who tirelessly works 2 jobs, striving to secure the future. His spirit is seen in the student spending another sleepless night, striving for a goal that sometimes seems unattainable. He is present in the athlete who tries again and again, and in the grieving person whose soul slowly finds healing. His essence manifests not only in the mighty, but also in those who wage daily struggles, and it has always been there. For Hercules, as a mythological figure, appeals not to our fantasies of greatness, but to our deep weariness, he seems to whisper to humanity, yes, the path is hard. Yes, mistakes have been made. Yes, exhaustion is overwhelming. But still continue your journey, perform the next labor, face the next beast, clean the next stable, try again. And if you fail, remember, even Hercules sometimes suffered defeats. The ancient Greeks, despite their penchant for drama, subtly understood this truth. Temples dedicated to him were often built on roadsides, at crossroads, at city gates, in places where travellers passed, burdened by long journeys, worries of trade, or internal fears. They turned to the god not only for physical strength, but for the resilience to continue their path. They left him offerings, oil and balm for tired muscles, as well as simple food. In their prayers they asked for patience, courage, and much-needed rest. And this veneration spread not only throughout Greece, but along Roman roads, in the bustling forums of Spain and Gaul, on the windswept borders of Britain. His name spread not as a symbol of ostentatious grandeur, but as an embodiment of quiet yet unwavering reliability. He became a kind of invisible spiritual companion, a god not of thunderous lightning, but of a weary yet affirmative nod at the end of an exhausting day. It is noteworthy that Hercules was never a god of conquest, nor a patron of war or kingship. He became a symbol of persistent effort, of survival, the embodiment of the tired hero who, against all odds, simply kept going. There is something profoundly human in this story. Even his apotheosis, his transformation into a god, is depicted not as triumphant glory, but as a long-awaited liberation. He is not carried to the heavens amidst chariots and trumpet blasts. He himself burns his mortal flesh, and this pain, as if breaking chains, reveals divinity not as a crown of power, but as a quiet inner core that remains when all external things disappear. Ultimately, he becomes what he was always meant to be, not a flawless ideal, but a complete whole person. And now, as this narrative draws to its logical conclusion, the reader might wonder what remains after all the trials. Not the monsters, for they have long faded into oblivion. Not his grandiose deeds, for they were his personal path. Only an idea remains, the idea that a person can face difficulties even when they seem insurmountable. That true strength is measured not by ostentatious glory, but by persistent effort. That one does not have to be a god to have genuine significance. It is enough to simply continue one's path. And sometimes, of course, it is necessary to stop, to lay down one's burdens, to rest by the fire, to eat, to drink, to sleep. Hercules, no doubt, would have understood this. He, more than anyone, deserved his peaceful sleep. And now, humanity also deserves its rest. So let everyone who has walked their path close their eyes, allowing the world to recede. The labours are behind. The lion has long been tamed. The serpents are silent. The arrows spent. Humanity is not broken. It is not falling behind. It is simply becoming itself. Like Hercules, like all of us, in this long, slow process of unfolding, humanity is not alone. The stars remember him, and they remember each of us. May it be a peaceful night for every hero. May they sleep soundly.